My number 7 pick is I think he's pretty well known. This one's pretty epic. Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman al-Absi, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi. Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman is if we had to give him a title, if I had to give him a title, I would basically call him Rasulullah's intelligence officer. He's basically the Rasulullah's spy master, the closest thing Rasulullah had to a professional spy. And his other famous title is the keeper of Rasulullah's secrets. So Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, my dear brothers and sisters, actually he's pretty epic. Pretty epic. I'm not biased in any way. I'd be like, oh no, you put him on the list because he's buried in Iraq. You're trying to claim him for Iraq. Well, first of all, yes, we are very proud of the fact that Hudhayfah is buried in Iraq. Let's get that clear out of the way. But anyway, let's go over his biography. Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman is an absolute legend. So Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, the beginning of his story is somewhat tragic. Hudhayfah and his father are Meccans. They're from Mecca. And so the issue with them was that they converted to Islam, but they did it like after Rasulullah had like moved to basically Rasulullah moved to Medina and they caught up late. So the story goes that Hudhayfah and his father, right, al-Yaman, what they did is they were trying to go do hijrah. They were trying to migrate to Medina with the other Muslims. This is like right after the Muslims first immigrated. And this was during the build-up to the Battle of Badr. And so along the way, a group of Meccans found them, and they're like, "Where are you going?" They said, "Oh, we're going to Yathrib." To like, why? They're like, "Oh, to do some business." They said, "You promise you're not going to go to Muhammad and like fight us alongside him?" And so they said, "No, we're not going to do that. We give you our word." And so when they got to Medina, Hudhayfah and his father, they came to Rasulullah. They said, "Ya Rasulullah, this is what happened. This is our situation. And we know you and the Muslims are getting ready for the Battle of Badr. You guys need all the help you can get." So the Battle of Badr, like I remember, dude, when you watch like Film al-Risala, like The Message or like Musalsal Umar or like whichever of the, forms of media that shows you the battle, it's very historically inaccurate because like the way they portray the Muslims is like, dude, everyone's wearing white. Everyone's got a sword. A few people got shields and spears. Like this looks like a professional army. This is not the way Rasulullah's army looked at the Battle of Badr. At the Battle of Badr, most Sahaba they didn't even have swords. The best thing they could come up with was like a piece of wood pulled off the trunk of a palm tree. They fought with literally anything they could find. So it gives a whole new meaning to the word make or break. So like the Battle of Badr is basically a miracle. It is a miracle that the Muslims won. And so Hudhayfah and his father was like, we want to fight alongside you, but we told these people this, like, what do we do? So Allah said to them, he's like, abide by your promise. So there's a lot of fuqaha that interpret this as like, when it comes to dealings with the non-Muslims, there's a lot of rulings that's derived from this incident. But anyway, Hudhayfah's father, him and his father did not take part in the Battle of Badr. And so, but they did, however, take part in the Battle of Uhud. The Battle of Uhud, we will cover it in more detail in a little bit. But Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, at the Battle of Uhud, so the Battle of Uhud is basically a disaster in every sense of the word. And had Allah, had there not been certain believers in Rasulullah's army, Ali ibn Abi Talib chief among them, it could have been much, much worse. So like most people remember Uhud because of the loss of Hamza. I'm going to give you another tragedy of Uhud. I'm going to give you a few today, actually. But like one of them was the death of Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman's father. So Hudhayfah and his father, they did not fight at Badr, but they did fight at Uhud. They were new to the Muslim community. They had recently migrated, and so they were not as well known. And so what happened in the Battle of Uhud, during all of the confusion, the Muslims confused Hudhayfah's father with one of the mushrikeen. And so poor Hudhayfah saw his father, like a group of Muslims basically attacked him, and he started yelling. He's like, "Oh, Muslims, that's my dad. He's one of you. He's one of us." But, in the midst of the chaos of battle and the clanging of swords and spears and, the battle cries, they couldn't, his voice was drowned out. And so he saw his father basically killed by, essentially what we would call friendly fire. And so when the battle was over, imagine, Rasulullah has had one of the worst days of his life, the loss of Uhud. And now he sees poor young Hudhayfah, he's lost his father. And so Rasulullah orders the Muslims who killed him, they said, I want you to pay the diya to him, right? And so Hudhayfah, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, he, this stance that he took, wallah, is one of the most beautiful, most honorable stances I've ever seen a companion of Rasulullah take. And I think many of us could benefit from following his example. He, when Rasulullah brought the Muslims before him, the ones who killed his father, to them, these are the men that killed your father, they're going to pay you the diya. What he said to them, he said, brothers in Islam, I know you made a mistake. It wasn't your intention. It was not intentional. And I know that at the moment, our community is struggling. So this diya that you would pay me, I want to donate it as a sadaqah to be divided among the Muslims. And so, you can imagine, it's like, dude, the guy just lost his father. And how many Sahaba hated Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi, for something he did to them before they became Muslims? Like, he killed my uncle, he killed my dad, he did this to me, he did that to me. Hudhayfah looked at the situation and he said, you know what, for the sake of Islam, I'm going to forgive my fellow Muslim brothers. And this is one of the most beautiful, most honorable positions I've ever seen a Sahabi take. And it has raised his status, high above the rest, in my opinion. But anyway, after this incident, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that Hudhayfah is one of the Sahaba with a pure heart, someone that he could really trust. And so Hudhayfah was well known for being the keeper of Rasulullah's secrets, to the point where there were certain secrets that that Rasulullah told Hudhayfah that he did not tell anyone else. All right, and I'll give you a few examples later. But a famous incident of Hudhayfah carrying out his duties as a spy master was during the Battle of Khandaq, when the Mushrikeen laid siege to Medina. When the Mushrikeen laid siege to Medina, what ends up happening is, like, after the famous incident where they crossed the Khandaq, where Amr ibn Abd Wud and his goons crossed the Khandaq only to get utterly destroyed by Imam Ali. Right, the morale of the Quraysh and their allies is like thin. They're like, dude, we've been besieging the city for months, and it doesn't look like they're getting any weaker. Our Jewish allies within the city have failed to, deliver. Excuse me. And the weather is not exactly favorable to us. And so there's an ayah in the Quran, I believe. I don't want to mispronounce it, but I believe it goes something along the lines of, وَكَفَى اللَّهَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْقِتَالِ. It's like, Allah, basically took care of the believers with regards to fighting. He made sure they did as little fighting as possible. And so one of the ways he did that was through the weather. One of the ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevented the mushrikeen from getting a head-on battle, which they desperately wanted in this situation, was through the Khandaq, and it was through the weather. And so it is reported that during the final stages of Ma'arakat al-Khandaq, what ended up happening is the weather got ridiculously cold. Like, during the nights, a powerful gust of wind would come and just blast away all the tents and all their supplies, and it would send their animals running, and it got ridiculously cold. So during one of these nights, it got ridiculously cold and ridiculously dark, to the point where people just couldn't see, according to the reports, you couldn't see the guy right in front of you. And so one night, Rasulullah says to Hudhayfah, he's like, I need you to do me a favor. He's like, what is it? He says, I'm going to go send you into the army of Quraysh, but don't do anything rash. Be patient, be quiet, tell me what you see, and come back. And so Hudhayfah, he packs his bow and arrow, he puts on his gear, right, as spies usually do, and so he sets off. And so he sneaks into the enemy camp, and he sees, basically what he sees is a fiasco. He sees that the Quraysh, their alliance is basically falling apart. Their supplies are just completely messed up. And, already people are talking about, it's like, dude, we got to give up this siege. We're not going to win this. And so Hudhayfah mentions, he's like, Abu Sufyan, I could hear him. Also, it's like, before I forget, well, he reports, like, before Rasulullah sent me, it's like, I came out with a blanket. I was freezing on that night. And so Rasulullah says, I'm going to send you into their army. What do you say? He says, okay, I'll do it. He says, he put his hand on me, and instantly I felt like I was in a bath. Immediately I felt warm. Immediately I felt comfortable. And so I set out. And so he says, well, I was there. I could overhear them talking. I could hear them talking about, we got to get out of here. We got to retreat. This whole thing has been a waste of time and resources. He says, and I see Abu Sufyan, he's, yelling out orders and everything. He says, Abu Sufyan, what did he do? he hopped on the back of his camel, he mounted his camel, and he tried to get his camel to stand up, and his camel's legs were still tied. It's like, this is how blind these people were during this dark night. It's like Abu Sufyan tried to mount his camel while it was still tied down. And so Hudhayfah says, he says, when I told this to Rasulullah, I still remember the way he laughed. Like, he laughed and I could see like his teeth. And so, the Battle of Khandaq, of course, was a decisive Muslim victory. Like, Quraysh would never again, challenge the Muslims in such a way. Anyway, so after the Battle of Khandaq, Hudhayfah is also famous for this incident called the Incident of Aqaba, where Rasulullah, when he was returning from the Battle of Tabuk, a group of Sahaba basically tried to assassinate Rasulullah. I believe the number of them was 12. And so basically they did this in the dead of the night while Rasulullah and his, he was riding on his camel and he was approaching a certain, it was like almost like a cliff. And so basically the slightest issue could cause the camel to fall off. Like if you frighten the camel, the results could be disastrous. And so Hudhayfah and a group of other companions were with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa when a group of people basically tried to frighten Rasulullah's his riding beast. And so basically Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa Allah protected him by way of sending him the wahi and warning him, prepare yourself, your camel is about to get spooked. And so he calmed the beast down before the critical moment, and it is said, Hudhayfah reports, like it was a flash of lightning, and I saw a few of the faces of the people who had tried to, basically assassinate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa. And so Rasulullah told him, he said, among my companions are 12 hypocrites, and he gave them the names. And so people used to ask Hudhayfah, it's like, Hudhayfah, was I one of the hypocrites? I always find this funny. It's like, why are you asking? Don't you know if you're one of the hypocrites? And so he asked Rasulullah, like, Rasulullah, why don't we kill these people? They tried to kill you. They're hypocrites. He said, no, if I kill them, people will say Muhammad likes to kill his companions. Right? So he said, but don't worry. It's like they'll meet their demises and Allah will reward them for what they tried to do. So Hudhayfah, like, this was a very, very big deal. It's like people used to monitor. It's like, dude, did Hudhayfah pray at so-and-so's funeral? Because if he didn't, that person was a hypocrite. Because you're not allowed to pray over a munafiq. And so, this was something very well known. It's like people would, basically just like wait, sweating nervously, waiting for Hudhayfah to show up to the funeral. So after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa, Hudhayfah was of the faction of Ali, and he did also partake in the conquest movement, specifically the conquest of Iraq and the conquest of Persia. I believe he participated in the Battle of Nahavand, which was like the final battle for control of the Persian Empire. So Hudhayfah, during the conquest movement, there's a lot of hadiths narrated from him. When the conquest movement was wrapping up, he basically wrote a letter to Uthman. He's like, dude, these people of Iraq are like, they're messing up the recitation of the Quran. You really need to standardize it. And so this is what triggered that movement to try to standardize the Quran. So Hudhayfah used to spend his time between Kufa and Madain. He used to travel between them. It seems he owned property in both. And while there, he used to narrate the narrations of Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi. So I remember there was a humorous report where like some person said to him, he said, Hudhayfah, some of the things that you narrate about Ali, if I narrate them to the people of Basra, they'll think I'm crazy. He says to him, yeah, Ali's just greater than all the other companions. There's no competition. He says, if you think those merits of Ali are crazy, you don't know anything yet. So Hudhayfah, like even in Iraq, like miles away from Imam Ali, he was like narrating his merits. And it seems that he's the reason why the people of Kufa later became so inclined towards Imam Ali, is because they had Hudhayfah there for years, basically preaching to them about the merits of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And so in the final years of his life, Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, famously, I remember I found a report where a group of people tell him, like, Hudhayfah, narrate to us like something Rasulullah told you. He said, if I told you, you'd kill me. You'd try to kill me. They said, Hudhayfah, we would never do that. Like, come on, man. Give us a chance. He said, what if I told you one of your mothers would come here to Iraq with a large battalion with intent to do harm to you? He said to him, Hudhayfah, what are you talking about, dude? He says, dude, Humayra and her army of, A'laj, big goons, is coming. And so people, they all looked at Hudhayfah, was like, dude, Hudhayfah is insane. Sure enough, Ma'arakatul Jamal was on the way. And so Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, he passed away during the early reign of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayhi. And so when Ammar bin Yasir and Imam al-Hasan came to Kufa to rally the Kufans to the cause of Imam Ali, it is said that Hudhayfah was brought into the room, right, his feet dragging on the ground, and he was, he had his arms on, two people beside him. And so these two people appeared to be his two sons. He had Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman had two sons. And so he called out to the people, he said, people, rush to defend your Imam. Rush to do jihad alongside your Imam. And so Hudhayfah ibn al-Yaman, these were like the last months of his life. He passed away and he was buried in Mada'in. So I believe him and Salman al-Farisi, salamullahi alayhi, are the two Sahaba of Rasulullah buried in Mada'in. So what more can be said about this great man? He was the keeper of Rasulullah's secrets, a man patient and loyal to Islam to the very end, and basically one of the conquerors. He played a critical role in the conquest of Iraq. And he's as a testament to like the might of Islam, he's literally buried in the former Sasanian capital.